Picture this. It's January 1776 in colonial America. Most people still consider themselves loyal British subjects. The idea of independence. That's radical to even dangerous. But on January 10th, everything changed when a slim, 47-page pamphlet hit the streets of Philadelphia. Within 3 months, over 100,000 copies would be in circulation. By year's end, nearly 500,000, in a population of just 2.5 million colonists. That's extraordinary. The pamphlet was called Common Sense, and its author, Thomas Paine, would do something remarkable. He'd convince everyday Americans that breaking away from the most powerful empire on earth wasn't just possible, it was necessary. Today, we're exploring how one pamphlet started a revolution. To understand why common sense mattered so much, we need to understand where Americans stood in early January 1776. Yes, there had been fighting. Lexington and Concord happened in April 1775. The Battle of Bunker Hill followed in June. But here's what might surprise you. Most colonists still weren't fighting for independence. They were fighting for their rights as British citizens. They wanted King George III to recognize their grievances and treat them fairly within the empire. The idea of actually separating from Britain, that seemed extreme to most people. Britain was the most powerful nation in the world. Its navy ruled the seas. Breaking away felt not just dangerous, but almost unthinkable. After all, many colonists had family ties to Britain. They shared a language, culture, and history. The Continental Congress had been meeting, but they were carefully avoiding the word independence. Even many of the men who'd become our founding fathers were uncertain. They were looking for reconciliation, not revolution. Into this uncertain moment stepped Thomas Paine, a recent immigrant who'd only been in America for about a year, and he was about to change everything. Thomas Paine's story is fascinating because he wasn't born into privilege or education. He was a working-class Englishman who'd struggled most of his life. He'd failed at multiple careers: corset maker, tax collector, shopkeeper. His first marriage ended when his wife died in childbirth. His second marriage fell apart. At 37 years old, Thomas Paine was basically broke and hopeless, but he had one thing going for him. He'd met Benjamin Franklin in London. Franklin saw something in Paine, his intelligence, his writing ability, or his passionate ideas about fairness and liberty. Franklin gave him letters of introduction and encouraged him to try his luck in America. Paine arrived in Philadelphia in November 1774, just as tensions between the colonies and Britain were heating up. He started writing for the Pennsylvania magazine, and he paid attention. He listened to people's frustrations. He saw the injustices clearly because he wasn't blinded by old loyalties. He was new here, with fresh eyes. What Paine understood was that sometimes an outsider can see truths that insiders miss. He could see what many native-born colonists couldn't quite admit to themselves yet, that this conflict wasn't really about taxes or representation anymore. It was about whether people had the right to govern themselves. So what made common sense so powerful? First, Paine wrote in plain language. This wasn't high-minded philosophical discourse filled with Latin phrases and references to ancient Greece. Paine wrote the way people talked. He used simple, direct words that any literate person could understand. And he wrote with passion. Listen to one of his most famous passages. Everything that is right or reasonable pleads for separation. The blood of the slain, the weeping voice of nature cries, 'tis time to part. He attacked the very idea of monarchy itself, calling it absurd. He pointed out that King George III wasn't some noble father figure, he was just a man, and not a particularly good one. Paine wrote, "Of more worth is one honest man to society than all the crowned ruffians that ever lived." That was radical. You have to understand, people had been raised to revere monarchy as part of the natural order, ordained by God. Paine dismantled that idea, piece by piece. But here's what made Paine brilliant. He didn't just criticize, he painted a vision. He made Americans see themselves not as failed British subjects, but as something new, the builders of a fresh start for humanity. He wrote that America had it within its power to begin the world over again. Imagine hearing that. Imagine being a farmer or a shopkeeper, struggling under British rules you had no say in making, and reading those words. Suddenly, you're not just complaining about unfair taxes, you're part of something historic, something meaningful. Paine also made practical arguments. He pointed out that America's economy didn't need Britain. Britain needed America's resources. He argued that being tied to Britain dragged America into European wars that weren't its concern. Independence wasn't just morally right, it made practical sense. The response to common sense was immediate and explosive. Remember, this is a time without internet, without television, without phones. News traveled slowly, but common sense spread like wildfire. People read it aloud in taverns. They discussed it in town meetings. It was reprinted in newspapers across the colonies. George Washington had it read to his troops. One of Paine's friends wrote that common sense was read to all ranks of people. Farmers discussed it, merchants debated it. It reached people who might never have engaged with political philosophy before. What Paine did was give people permission to think. Thoughts they'd been afraid to think. He gave them words for feelings they'd had but couldn't quite express. Suddenly, independence wasn't just possible, it felt inevitable. By the spring of 1776, the mood had shifted dramatically. In July, the Continental Congress would declare independence, and much of the Declaration of Independence echoes ideas that Paine had popularized just months earlier. Here's something beautiful about Paine's character. He made almost no money from Common Sense. Even though it was possibly the best-selling book in American history up to that point, he gave away the copyright and used his share of profits to buy supplies for the Continental Army. He wasn't in it for personal gain. He genuinely believed in the cause. So, what can we take away from this moment in history, 249 years ago today? First, never underestimate the power of clear communication. Paine wasn't the first person to think about independence, but he was the one who could explain it in ways everyone could understand. Sometimes, making complex ideas accessible is the most revolutionary act of all. Second, timing matters. Paine's pamphlet arrived at exactly the right moment when people were frustrated but uncertain, when they needed someone to give voice to their unspoken hopes. Third, one person can make a difference. Thomas Paine was a nobody, a failed businessman, a recent immigrant, but he had courage, clarity of thought, and the ability to write. Those tools were enough to help birth a nation. And finally, ideas have consequences. Those 47 pages weren't just words on paper. They inspired people to risk everything, their lives, their fortunes, their sacred honor. As the Declaration would put it, they helped create the world we live in today. On January 10, 1776, Thomas Paine published Common Sense. Within months, it had helped transform 30 separate colonies into one united cause. By July, that cause had a name: independence. And by 1783, impossibly, those colonists had won. All because someone had the courage to write down what needed to be said, in words everyone could understand, at the moment when people were finally ready to listen. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed learning about this pivotal moment in American history, please like and subscribe, and leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how one pamphlet changed the course of history.